Every single second, nearly $1,000 drains from the African continent. Not for schools, not for hospitals, not for infrastructure. Gone. $29 billion a year, siphoned away as debt interest. More than the entirety of the aid Africa receives, flowing straight back to the very nations that once colonized it. Is this development, or dependency by design? Africa, a continent brimming with potential, resilience, and untapped resources, stands at the crossroads of global economics. Yet, beneath the surface of its vibrant cultures and breathtaking landscapes lies a hidden truth, one that shapes its destiny in ways many never see. Every year, Africa pays a staggering $29 billion in debt interest. That's more than it receives in aid. Let that sink in. For decades, countries across the continent have borrowed heavily to fund infrastructure, healthcare, and education. But the cost of repayment has become a crushing burden. Take Zambia, for example. In 2020, the country defaulted on its debt after spending 40% of its revenue servicing loans. Meanwhile, Mozambique, once hailed as a rising star, saw its economy crippled by hidden debts worth $2 billion in 2016. These are not isolated cases. They are symptoms of a system that perpetuates inequality. The roots of this crisis trace back to the 1970s and 1980s, when African nations, emerging from colonialism, turned to international lenders for support. Terms were often harsh, and interest rates soared. Fast forward to today, and the cycle continues. Wealthy nations and institutions profit from Africa's debt, while African governments struggle to allocate resources to their people. But here's the twist: Africa is rich, not just in culture, but in resources. The continent holds 30% of the world's mineral reserves, 60% of its arable land, and abundant renewable energy potential. Yet, its wealth flows outward, funding debt payments instead of development. And now, the revelation: between 1970 and 2015, Africa received $1 trillion in loans. But it paid back $1.4 trillion in interest alone. Wait, what? That's $400 billion more than the original amount borrowed. The math doesn't add up, and neither does the fairness. This is the hidden truth, a story of imbalance, exploitation, and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. Africa's journey is far from over, and its voice is growing louder. The question is, will the world listen? Africa holds 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land. Let that sink in. 60%. Yet, staggeringly, it spends billions importing food every year. In 2021 alone, Africa imported $55 billion worth of agricultural products, goods that could have been grown on its own fertile soil. This isn't just a missed opportunity, it's a paradox that speaks volumes about the continent's economic contradictions. Take Nigeria, for example. Africa's largest economy spends over $10 billion annually on food imports, despite having vast expanses of land capable of feeding not just its own population but millions beyond its borders. Meanwhile, Ethiopia, home to some of the most fertile regions on the continent, has faced recurring food insecurity, forcing it to rely on foreign aid and imports. It's a cycle that keeps Africa dependent, even as it sits on the resources to break free. But why does this matter now? Because the world is changing. Global food demand is projected to rise by 50% by 2050, and Africa's untapped agricultural potential could be a game changer. Imagine harnessing just a fraction of that 60% of uncultivated land. It could transform economies, reduce dependency, and position Africa as a global breadbasket. Yet, instead, the continent remains a net importer, paying billions in debt interest, $29 billion annually, more than it receives in aid. Here's the kicker: Africa's agricultural imports aren't just about food. They're about missed opportunities for innovation, jobs, and self-sufficiency. Every dollar spent importing wheat or rice is a dollar not invested in local farmers, infrastructure, or technology. And while the world races to secure food supplies, Africa's potential remains buried under layers of inefficiency and underinvestment. Wait, what? Here's the twist. Despite importing food, Africa is also exporting it. In 2020, the continent exported $35 billion worth of agricultural products, primarily cash crops like cocoa, coffee, and cashew nuts. So, while Africa feeds the world's cravings for chocolate and coffee, it struggles to feed itself. It's a duality that defies logic, a continent rich in resources, yet trapped in a cycle of dependency. The question isn't just why this matters now, it's how long Africa can afford to let this continue. And so, the cycle continues. Africa, rich in resources, paradoxically burdened. $29 billion. That's more than the aid it receives, money that could be invested in healthcare, education, infrastructure, fueling sustainable development. This isn't just about statistics, it affects real lives. It dictates the quality of schools, the availability of medicine, the opportunities for young entrepreneurs dreaming of a brighter future. This debt burden is a handbrake on progress. But knowledge is power. Understanding these economic forces is the first step to reclaiming our narrative. That's why we created the Africa Wealth Blueprint at pornoafric.com/shop.html. Just $27 to change your money mindset and tap into the continent's potential. The future of Africa's economy rests in the hands of its people. Let's demand accountability, advocate for fair trade practices and build a self-sufficient future. High voltage follow, subscribe and like at Panafric for daily Africa Plus Money Plus Wisdom.